In this video, we are going to continue working on the death system to add a spawn object feature and also the health bar feature. And now let's open the death system script. And I'm going to also open the create object script. So here in the death system script, we already create a public array of create object called spawn objects. And inside the death method, we already create the for loop to loop through this spawn objects array. And we need to run the spawn function. So now we need to go to the create object script and we need to start working on the spawn method inside this script. And here I'm going to paste a couple of code and I'm going to explain this one by one. So the first variable, it's a type of game object, and this will be the prefabs that we want to create upon death event. And this can be an explosion, flame particles, or a coin object. And the second variable, it's a type of integer, and this will decide how many objects that we want to spawn. And here below we have the header attribute to separate the fields in the inspector layer. And I've added the title auto destroy properties. So to use this attribute, you can just start with a square bracket and then type the keyword header. And inside this parenthesis, we need to pass a string value, and this will be the title of the header in the inspector. And the next variable, it's a type of bool called auto destroy, and this will decide whether we want to destroy the game object that we've spawned using this component here or not. And the next variable, it's a type of float, and this will delay the destroy if we decide to destroy this object. So this time to destroy can add delay whenever we want to destroy a object that has been spawned by this create object component. And the last variable, it's a type of vector tree, and it has a scope of private, and this variable are going to be used as the position to spawn the object by this component. And next we can just delete the update and start method, and here I'm going to paste the code here, and this is the method that we are going to use to spawn the object. It is called create, and it has to be a public method, so we can access this method from other script. So here in the start of the method, we are setting the position value to be the transform.position. This will grab the position of the script owner, but then we want to zero the y value. So in the next line, we are overriding the position.y to 0, and we need to do this because if we are going to spawn a coin, then we want to make sure that the coin is spawned on the same y-axis or y-plane as the player, so the player can collide with it and can pick up the coin. And here next we are creating a for loop so we can spawn multiple objects depending on the create amount value. And if we set the create amount value more than 1, then we are going to create or instantiate multiple objects inside this loop here. And here the pool manager throws an error because the pooling manager script called pooling manager. So let's just replace the pool manager name into pooling manager on both of the lines here. And here basically inside the loop we are instantiating the object using the pooling manager, and we store this to a local or temporary variable called temp, and we pass the object to create prefabs as the argument and the position and quaternion.identity for the rotation. And if the auto destroy boolean is enabled, then we are returning or destroying the object using the pooling manager, but this time we are passing the temp because we want to destroy the one that are instantiated on the scene, not the prefab. So we need to pass the temp as the game object, and for the delay we are passing the value from time to destroy variable. And now if we go back to the death system script, inside the death method we can run the create function inside the first for loop by typing the variable name, which is spawn objects, and we need to pass the index. So let's just add a square bracket and then pass the integer I, and then we can run the create method. And here we also have the Unity event called onDeath event, but we never invoked this in the previous video. And this basically can trigger everything in Unity. It can trigger method or functions from component and from other objects. So whenever we want to enable or disable the child object or other object, we can use this, or we can run a certain custom function. We can also use this onDeath event. So here below the first for loop, I'm going to type the onDeath event variable, and I'm going to run the invoke method by adding dot invoke and sets of parentheses, and this will invoke all the registered callbacks on this onDeath event list. And another thing that we need to do is we need to create an update UI function inside the health system script. So let's just go do that. Here below the check health method, I'm going to paste the code here, and it's called update UI. So I'm going to make sure that we already declared the health bar variable, and we have already declared this. And let's just copy the name and paste it here, because the code that I've pasted has a different capitalization. And here for the health, it should be the current health divided by the max health. So we get the normalized health value. So basically this update UI method is going to check first if we have a reference inside the health bar variable, or is it null. And if it's not null, then it will run the code inside of the block. And then we are creating a vector3 value called scale, and we are setting the value to a vector3.1, which is 1 on all of the axes, and we are going to use this to change the scale of the health bar. And next we are creating a float value, and this will be the x-axis scale for the health bar. And for the value, basically we are dividing the current health with the max health, so we get the normalized health from 0 to 1, and then we pass this float value into the x component of the scale vector. And after we modify the x component of the scale vector, we are passing the scale value to the health bar transform local scale. And this will create an illusion of health depleting by modifying the local scale of the health bar game object. And we need to call this update UI method inside the take damage method. So here we can just type update UI and open and close parenthesis. Let's save the script and let's go back to Unity. And first we are going to modify the cube game object. Let's select the cube and let's change the inspector mode back to normal from the debug. And here let's add a create object component. And let's go to the prefabs folder. Under the FX folder we have the explosion prefab. So let's select the cube again, and then let's drag the explosion prefab into the object to create slot under the create object component. And here we need to check the duration of the explosion particle, so we can just select the explosion prefabs, and under the inspector we can see that under the particle system component the duration is set to 1.5. so we can use this value to delay the destroy, and make sure also the looping options is disabled on the particle system. Now select the cube again, and let's enable the auto destroy boolean. And for the time to destroy, I'm going to set this to a value greater than 1.5. So I'm going to set this to 2. And let's expand the spawn object here. And I'm going to drag the create object component to the spawn object slot, and it will automatically add this component into the first element. And let's also add the flame smoke prefabs to the cube here. And you can see we have a flame in the game view. And let's disable the flame smoke game object, so it is disabled on start. And if we select the cube game object, let's add an entry to the onDeath event field under the death system component. And we can drag the flame smoke game object to the object slot here. And let's browse the function here, go to the game object, and here you can see the set active method. So let's just select the set active method, and let's enable the boolean here, or the checkbox, by checking it. And that function or that method are going to basically change the active state of the flame object here. So right now it's set to disabled by default, but whenever the onDeath event is invoked, it is going to enable this flame smoke game object. And here we want to leave the cube game object alive, so let's just uncheck the destroy option, and this will prevent the object from getting destroyed. And now let's give it a try. And there you go. When the cube gets destroyed or the health is depleted, you see that we have this explosion, and the flame smoke also gets enabled. And now the box collider is also disabled here. So now we cannot shoot this object anymore. Okay, so let's stop the game here. And now we are going to set up the health bar. And let's create a canvas under the cube game object here. And let's set the canvas render mode to world space. And because we are not using the event system for this canvas here, we can just safely delete the event system. And event system, it is used to detect click on canvas object or raycast on canvas object. And we are not going to use that for this health bar. So we can just safely delete the event system. And let's rotate the canvas by 90 degrees on the x-axis. Let's zero out the position. And let's decrease the width and height to 200 and 100. But it's still too big. And to make this smaller, we want to change the scale. Otherwise, the UI object is going to be very pixelated if we decrease the width and the height value. So let's just change the scale value to a very small value. I'm going to set this to 0.05 on all axes. And let's move this canvas to the cube position. We can set the Z position to 0. And I don't think we need this canvas to be this big. So let's just decrease the width to 100. And under this canvas, let's create a new image. And let's just call this health. And I'm going to change the width to around 25. And for the height, I'm going to set this to 5. And I'm going to move the health bar to be in front of the cube object. And this is going to be the health bar background. And it's still too thick on the height. So let's just change the height to 2.5. And as you can see here in the game view, we can see the bar nicely. And I'm going to set this bar color to a grayish color. And let's duplicate the bar by pressing Ctrl D. And I'm going to set the second health or the second image to be the child of the first health object. And this is going to be the health bar. And I'm going to change the color to red. And here, using the anchor preset, I'm going to change the pivot by holding the shift on the keyboard. And then I'm going to select the one on the left here, the preset on the left. And this will change the pivot of this image to be the most left on the image boundary. And this way, if we modify the X scale of the object, it will keep the anchor on the left side of the image. So we will be able to create the health bar illusion here, or the illusion of the health depleting. And now we have set up the health bar. Let's select the cube game object. And under the health system component, we can just drag this health bar game object to the health bar slot on the health system. And let's save the scene and let's give it a try. Now if I shoot the cube, you see that the health bar is decreasing. So we have a very nice representation of the health on the scene. And another thing that we can do, we can disable the health bar once the enemy is destroyed. So here under the health system script and under the check health method, we can add a code inside the if current health is less or equal than 0. And here we can just access the health bar and access the transform and then parent and then game object and then run the set active method and set its value to false. And we need to access its parent here, because if we go back to Unity and see that the health bar object is basically the child of the health bar background. So we want to actually disable the health game object, not the health bar. Or there is a better way. So I'm going to delete this code here. And basically we can just disable the health game object using the onDeath event under the death system. This way we don't add more codes that are not need to be added, and we can use this onDeath event to invoke the action that we want to do. So let's just add an entry onDeath event, and we can drag the health game object, and under the function dropdown we can just go to the game object and then run the set active method and then set the toggle or the boolean value to false, and this will disable the health game object when this game object is defeated. So now let's give it another try. And now as you can see, when the enemy is defeated, the health bar gets hidden. And this concludes the spawn object and the health bar lesson. And let's continue to the next video.